Namaste, my name is Dr. Sonalini Kumar, and I will be doing a lecture today on the feminist theorizing of the sex-gender distinction. I just wanted to introduce myself before we start. My name, as I said, is Sonalini Kumar. I'm Dr. Sonalini Kumar. I teach in the School of Global Affairs at Ambedkar University in Delhi. And basically, I'm a political scientist by training, and my research is around urban planning. How do we understand the city and the region? But as a person who has taught at Delhi University and Ambedkar University for many years, gender and feminist theorizing has been one of the areas that I have most concentrated in teaching. So this is in a way also my specialization. And I'm really happy to be talking here at the Ramanujan College refresher course. So welcome to all of you to this refresher course. Thank you to the college for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of you. And I do wish that it was a live meeting so that we could have had an interactive session. But since we can't do that, I will do my best to summarize what I think are the key areas of the feminist theorizing of the sex-gender debate. So before I start, I wanted to say that my lecture will be almost entirely in English because that's the language I'm most comfortable teaching in. पर मैं हिंदी में भी बात करती हूँ, मैं दिल्ली में रहती हूँ, तो हिंदी बोलना तो स्वाभाविक है. और अगर हम क्लास में लाइव इंटरेक्शन कर रहे होते तो आप शायद रोक के मुझे सवाल भी पूछ सकते थे कि आप ये समझाइए इंग्लिश में या हिंदी में. आई कैन स्विच बिटवीन टू लैंग्वेजेस. But since this is a recorded meeting, and my understanding is that most of the participants are also studying and teaching in English medium, I will mostly be teaching in English. कभी कभी अगर मुझे लगे कि किसी उदाहरण के तौर पर अगर हिंदी बोलना ज़्यादा वाकिफ है तो फिर मैं हिंदी में भी बोलूँगी. तो शुरू करते हैं. Let's start the lecture. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to present that onto the screen, and hopefully it will become clear what we are talking about as we move along. So as I said, this presentation, lecture, whatever you call it, is going to be on the sex-gender debate. And specifically, it's going to be on the feminist rethinking of the sex-gender debate. I will try to cover all of the basic points involved in this debate. It is possible that it is very familiar to some of you because you may have taught it or studied it in your higher education. But I'm assuming that it is a relatively new topic for most of you, or at least not fully familiar. So I'm going to talk about the basics. And then we'll move on to some more complex arguments in the latter half of the lecture. So let's start with a poem, okay? Because we all like poetry. Now, I have chosen to take a quote, which is actually a lot. In fact, I want to say this, that a lot of the material that I'll be covering today can be found in some of the best known feminist thinkers and writers on gender today, especially in India, and I've tried to use Indian sources. And this particular quote and a couple of other quotes in my presentation, I'll point out where they are from a book. This is actually from an article that I can share in case you want to read it. This article is written by Professor Nivedita Menon of Jawaharlal Nehru University. So these are two Shaivism, poets who belong to the tradition of Shaivism that she has quoted. So as you can read on the screens, the 12th century poet Basavanna, he says, look here, dear fellow, I wear these men's clothes only for you. Sometimes I'm a man, sometimes I'm a woman. There is another Shiv Bhakt. शिव भक्ति की परंपरा स्पेशली साउथ में कर्नाटका में प्रेजेंट डे कर्नाटका में काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण रही है. तो एक और शिव भक्त की चर्चा यहाँ पर हो रही है जिनका नाम था देवरा दसमैया. He writes this is Basavanna is 12th century and Devara Dasamaya is writing in the 10th century, 2 centuries earlier. He says, if they see breasts and long hair coming, they call it woman. If beard and whiskers, they call it man. But look, the self that hovers in between is neither. Sorry, you can't see the last sentence there, but the self that hovers that between is neither. So what is the point that these poets are trying to make, right? It's a point that is very widely discussed in most Sufi and Bhakti traditions, in most mystical traditions, and in many even religious and social traditions around the world. The point is that gender, and I'll talk about the distinction between sex and gender, but gender as in the way that we appear in society. Which gender do we appear as, male or female? That particular identity is external to us. So the point they're making is that the inner self, the self that hovers in between, जो बीच में मंडरा रहा है, वो जो एक हमारा जो self है, वो उसका कोई gender नहीं है. It is neither male nor female. So with that, I want to start this discussion on how do we actually start thinking about this sex and gender distinction, and what exactly is it, and does it help us to actually move towards a world which feminists and many others believe in, which is a world of equality between the sexes. Why do we even make a distinction between sex and gender? So this is the sex-gender distinction. Again, apologies if many of you know about it already, but I will assume that you haven't thought about it as systematically as if you were doing research on it. And if you have, then please bear with me. But I hope that this will be useful to everybody. So the sex-gender distinction, okay, is a key contribution of feminism. What is feminism itself? I'll take a very, very simple definition here. And feminism is a very controversial subject for many people. It should not be so controversial for us who are academics and teachers and researchers, because our idea is to move beyond controversy and get to some clarity and get to some agreement and some consensus on every subject based on our findings, right? But of course, nothing is, completely impersonal, and feminism is a topic that people tend to take very personally and tend to feel very strongly personally about. It is also a very strongly political topic and politicized topic. So let us just stick to the facts here, and let's stick to a very basic definition of feminism. How do I define feminism? Feminism is the movement, both intellectual and political. When I say intellectual, I mean it is the effort to understand by using our minds, right? Both, it could be a popular understanding, right? Because it's not that only us as teachers and academics have a monopoly on understanding. समझ और सोच कहीं पर भी हो सकती है. वो एक चाय की दुकान पर भी चर्चा हो सकती है फेमिनिज्म पर, और बहुत ही हाई लेवल के रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट में भी हो सकती है. तो जहां पर भी इस किस्म का सोच नारीवाद के प्रति है, उसे हम फेमिनिज्म कहेंगे. या अगर समाज में जो औरतों और मर्दों के बीच में जो भेदभाव है, उसके ऊपर जहां पर भी सोच हो रहा है, उसको मैं फेमिनिज्म बोलूंगी. उसे मैं नारीवाद का नाम दे रही हूँ. सो फेमिनिज्म इज द मूवमेंट बोथ इंटेलेक्चुअल, okay, so intellectual includes popular and scholarly, and political. So it's a movement, it's an intellectual movement, it's also a political movement to understand and reshape the world, to change the world on the basis of the idea of equality between the sexes. So I've taken the simplest definition of feminism. All right. So having taken this definition, and of course, feminism can be found inside books, it can be found on the streets, it can be found in the parliament, it can be found in TV debates, right? It is everywhere. It is because this kind of thinking and rethinking about gender roles, about men and women, what is a man, who is a woman, this happens everywhere. So the sum total of those intellectual and political engagements, we can refer to as feminism. So the sex-gender distinction is a distinction that helped feminists to counter the oldest justification for gender discrimination and the foundation of all patriarchal systems, the idea of the natural superiority of men over women. So again, as most of you would already know, what we call patriarchy in feminism, which is Pitrasatta, is in Hindi, is a system that favors, on the whole, the interests and the needs of men over the interests and the needs of women, on the basis of the assumption that men have some kind of natural superiority. Either the argument in patriarchy is that men are naturally superior, or the argument is a bit more subtle, it's a bit more hidden, and the argument says that men and women are to be defined as essentially different from each other. And if they're essentially different from each other, then they must have different roles in society. So their biological and natural differences must have a reflection in the way that they perform their roles in society. Okay. And patriarchy would either overtly, as in outright, openly talk about the natural superiority of men's natures, abilities, and their roles, or it would say that men are not necessarily superior, but they should be performing the more important and the more visible and the more valuable work in society, whereas women should be confined or they should confine themselves to what is called the domestic sphere. They should do the work of nurture and care, which is generally not as visible and not as well paid in our societies, in any society up to now historically, as men's work. So this, the entire foundation of patriarchy is built on the difference of the natural differences between men and women. This is where feminists start talking about what is natural and what is not. And of course, this is extremely complex. It's a far more complex question than it appears at first sight, because शुरू में देखा जाए तो ये जो नेचर वाली जो बात है और क्या स्वाभाविक है और क्या अस्वाभाविक है, ये बहुत ही मामूली सी बात लगती है, but actually when you start going into the complexity of the matter, many things, many disagreements and many surprises keep coming up. So the feminist theorizing of the sex gender distinction and then their re-theorizing is a way to systematically think about what is natural and what is not when it comes to men and women, because the idea of the natural is at the basis of patriarchy. Okay. Now, so this is why if you see in the modern history of feminism, I want to make a clarification here that feminism is not something that only exists in modernity. The word feminism, of course, is used in the English language only in the modern West, right? It comes from, a word that was used, the first recorded time that the word was used was in the 19th century, right? The word feminism, and its meaning has changed a little bit over the last 100 to 150 years. However, questioning of the gender distinctions in society, which is what patriarchy believes in, is as old as human society itself. We don't have records of how old it is, but we assume that it is very old, because as we just saw in the previous slide, there were people in the 10th and 12th century male bhakti poets from the Shaivism tradition, right? That were asking this question. So if it was happening in the 10th century, we can assume that it is happening even earlier. And this questioning happens, and we find these kinds of questions being raised in societies across the world. But when I say feminism, let's now come back to modern feminism, because that's the arena that is most relevant to us and it is most recent. So most of us would be familiar with it. 18th and 19th century feminism in the West, at least, it had a single purpose. It strove to separate women from their bodies. Separate women from the bodies ka kya matlab hai? It strove to say that women cannot simply be seen as bodies that are, that have certain biological features. Women are also minds, right? So the idea was to separate women from the patriarchal emphasis on their bodily or biological nature and to present them as rational creatures, to present them as equal to men in the capacity they had for exercising rationality. Now, what is rationality? Rationality was defined very specifically within Western liberal political thinking as the idea that one has independent, autonomous judgment between right and wrong, and one has the capacity to distinguish between different moral judgments, to make moral judgments on the basis of the capacity of reason. Reason is usually written with a capital R, and rationality is the basis for the entire construction of the liberal autonomous individual in Western political thought. So usually it was only men who would give to themselves the capacity for rationality, because it was usually male thinkers who were writing all those books about in Western political thought, and they had somehow decided that women were less than rational. And these stereotypes about women are with us even now. We continuously hear women being described as over emotional, over this, over that, as if they're not really in control of their senses. So to counter that, 18th and 19th century feminism in the West, but in many other parts of the world as well. So I'm talking about thinkers like Mary Wollstonecraft and the women who were involved in what is called the suffragist movement. The suffragist movement, of course, as most of you would know, is the movement for to demand the vote for women, which was eventually successful in the first few decades of the 20th century. So throughout the 19th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, women were fighting simply for the right to be recognized for their minds rather than their bodies. Now, it should be a very simple matter. It should end there. We have said that women are as rational and as intelligent, as capable of making moral and cognitive judgments as men. That's the end of the story. However, it doesn't end there, because the idea that there is a natural biological difference between men and women that somehow is socially relevant and must then reflect in the social roles that they play continues to persist in several very important ways right until now. So how do we actually then respond to this if we believe in a world of equality between the sexes? And you may or may not believe in a world of equality between the sexes, but if you do, then there are still some hurdles or obstacles we must cross in order to get there. So this is why feminists had to rethink and relook at this sex and gender distinction. So what exactly is the distinction? The initial response that women had, right? When I say women, I'm really saying feminist women, but again, feminists are not only women. So let me say feminist men and women. The initial response that feminists had when we saw that there was a persistence of patriarchal reasoning about women being inferior to men somehow biologically, was to say that yes, there are some differences between men and women. Of course, this is not something anybody can deny. And right now I'm only talking about two sexes, but as we all know, there is the third sex or the third gender. And in fact, we now recognize, and I'll come to this point later, that gender is and sexual difference, biological sexual difference, is a bit of a spectrum or a continuum rather than a binary in which there is a clear male and there's a clear female. So there are, of course, people who are clearly male without any doubt biologically, and clearly female without any doubt biologically. And these constitute the majority of the world's population. But there is also, in the middle of that spectrum, a large number of other sexual traits. And also this phenomenon called intersexuality, which means babies that are born with features of both male and female physical anatomy and physiology. So we'll come to what complication that creates later on. But right now, let's assume that we're talking about a world primarily of biological males and biological females who are clearly distinct from each other. Feminists began to say, to respond to patriarchal reasoning, that yes, there are some biological differences. What are these differences? It's very obvious. The anatomy is different, right? Women and men have different bodies. Those bodies can perform different functions. There are many things that male and female bodies do that are exactly the same as each other, right? So when you're eating an apple, it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman. But there are, of course, many things that male and female bodies do that are clearly different from each other. And this is to do with the process of reproduction, sexual reproduction. So in the process of sexual reproduction, clearly men and women, biological males and human biological females, have different roles. Once the infant, the offspring, is born, then also one critical, crucial difference between men and women remains. I don't even need to say it. All of you know what that is. Women can lactate and breastfeed the child, whereas men cannot, right? In all other aspects, men and women are the same when it comes to other activities. And these are not, there are differences, of course, but they are not biological differences. So let's just keep that distinction. And this is the distinction that was so important for feminism for most of the 20th century. And as I said, its roots were in the idea about women's rationality in the 18th and 19th century. So most of the 20th century as well, the sex-gender distinction is what feminism began to make as the cornerstone or as the pillar or the foundation upon which we asked for an equal world. Very simply, the argument is this, that yes, there are biological differences between men and women when it comes to sexual reproduction. However, in all other areas of life, the differences that we think are natural are in fact social and to some extent political. Why political? Because politics is about making decisions about the way in which large groups of people should behave in society. There is a question of power and decision making involved anytime we talk about politics. And these aspects of power and decision making, when applied to gender, they can help to keep up a system in which there is a system which is patriarchal. All right. So the differences, the wide differences that we see between men and women, why, for instance, and I'll come to that in the next couple of slides, why, for instance, men continue to get paid more for doing similar kinds of jobs as women, or they just get the better paying jobs. Why our public institutions, our public sphere, our media, parliament, military, arts, cinema, culture, agriculture is all completely dominated by the achievements of men, whereas it's much harder to find women doing equally well in all these fields, even though the situation keeps changing every day. But even now, these very visible differences between men and women in our society and the amount of power they hold. When I say power, I mean not only the jobs they do, which I just mentioned, but also how much income they have, how much assets they tend to hold, and so on, the differences continue to show up in society. A recent UNDP report, in fact, found that the income and asset differentials, not the education, women are entering educational field in much larger numbers historically than ever before in any society. However, the income and asset differentials between men and women, men on the whole average and women on the whole average, have gone up rather than come down in the last 20 years. So that's something that should tell us to think a little bit. It should make us think about what is going on. So feminists said that apart from differences in the roles that men and women play in sexual reproduction, actually there is no difference at all between men and women. Women can do exactly what men can do. And you know, every day we'll have right now the Tokyo Olympics are going on as I'm recording this lecture. Every day we get examples of female athletes showing performances that are almost the same in their particular sport as the male athletes, as the male sports persons, right? The gap between sports performance of men and women has been steadily narrowing over the past 100 years. And this is something that can be proven by statistics. This is empirically provable. Another area that we see the differences narrowing are, for instance, women entering hitherto completely male professions like fighter pilots and elite echelons of the armed forces and the commando forces in the world. So there were assumptions earlier that women were not tough enough. They didn't have endurance. They didn't have stamina. They had special needs. They had biological burdens that because of which they could not enter the elite forces of the armed forces, but all those assumptions have generally been proved wrong by this entry of women into, so the performance of women in these extremely highly valued male activities has been getting better and better. Even if the overall numbers are very small, when one woman does it, then it becomes harder to make the argument that women's biology is the problem. So women's biology does not seem to be the problem as far as these arenas is concerned. Okay. However, biological determinism, which is the idea that, like I was just saying, that women are in some ways different from men, that continues to persist. So even if most people don't say that women are inferior to men, they continue to say that no, they are different from men. So when the feminists acknowledge that difference, but say that, you know, the rest of the differences are actually social, that argument also does not go very far, because those who believe in an unequal world, they'll continue to stress on the biological differences. And they'll say, but you yourself are accepting that women are biologically different. So how do we, how can they do the same things that men can do? And why should they even want to do the same things? Like some people would say, why do women want to be like men when they are different? And I'm sure you've either heard it or even thought it yourself. So how do we address this? So as I said, modern patriarchy generally manifests in a sexual division of labor. And I've already spoken about this, so maybe I'll just let you read what is written on the screen on your own. This persistent idea, stubborn idea, ये तो औरतों का काम है और ये मर्दों का काम है. So I will end there and I will come back with this so the feminist sex gender distinction is basically the idea that we need to be very careful when it comes to what are really biological differences and what are social differences, which are a product of patriarchal socialization or conditioning, basically. Sometimes we can use the term conditioning, and I'll just show you this feminist response again. So under the name of biology, under the argument given for biology, men and women have been from birth conditioned differently from the time that they were little children. And they grow up to think of themselves as different and then end up having very different lives. And that is what gender is. Gender is the socialization of men and women to be different and act differently in society, which is always justified as flowing from biological differences. But if you look for the true biological cause of it, there may not be a true biological difference. So that is the feminist sex gender distinction. It should have helped us to make an argument for a more equal world, but the struggle still continues. And that's because there are some further confusions that we need to address. And feminists themselves have tried to now re-theorize the sex gender distinction. So we will talk about that in the next segment. Thank you.